Hey guys, Misery here, back with another CZM video. And in today's video, we're doing the ultimate Season 3 deck guide, whether it be for Seasonal Chaos or Sortie. So in this video, just like my Heidemarie guide, if you guys saw that, thank you guys for the ton of support and love on that video. It means a lot. Just like in that video, my friend Gordon was in it, he's going to be in this one too. So, I'm going to be talking about Seasonal Chaos and he's going to be talking about Sortie. But we're going to be talking about Seasonal Chaos first. So up on the screen right now, I made a little infographic for the newer players. If you're not really as familiar with Faint Memory and grinding decks, so the way grinding decks works is you have a point cap in the chaos runs you do, and this point cap depends on the tier of the world you're in. So like tier 15 is 170, but in the top right there's a little button you can press which is nightmare mode, and it adds one tier to your world. So if you have a tier 15 world, if you activate nightmare, it'll go to tier 16, and then that's the 180 point cap per character, which is the max you can get. But some standard things that you're going to need to know for farming decks in Seasonal Chaos: there's a max limit of 5 removals. Transforming and converting a card through whether it be like an event or something will count as a removal. When you're copying cards, the first and second dupes are going to be 0 points, but the third dupe is going to be 40 points. Divine, Forbidden, and Neutral cards all going to add 20 points to your save data, alongside Persona, which is a new type of card specifically in Season 3. And if you played during Season 2, you knew we had refinements, which refinements costed 10. But in Season 3, we have these things called gear engravings, and those are free. They do not cost any. But every unit in this entire game has 4 starting cards and 4 Epiphany cards. The starting cards are going to cost 20 points to remove, and the Epiphany cards are going to cost 0 to remove. Most units, you only want to remove the basics for the starting cards. You usually don't want to remove their Epiphany starting card, but it's nice because you're probably going to remove some of their Epiphany cards which cost 0 points. It actually used to cost points in Season 1 if you played that long like me and Gordon. Deck farming was like really bad back then, so I don't even know how we went through that. We must have really been on the grind. But yeah, with the introduction of Season 3, there's this new game mode called Sortie. So Sortie is going to be best in slot for getting the designated cards you want on the deck, but Seasonal Chaos is still going to be like your way to farm the template of the deck, if that makes sense. Seasonal Chaos is best in slot for gear. So you farm a Seasonal Chaos deck, right? You get good gear, and maybe you get a few good specific Epiphanies for the specific deck you want. That's where Sortie comes in. Sortie is going to allow you to finish the deck very easier. It kind of dims it down in a way. So although they did add a bunch of new divines to the pool, technically you could just farm Sortie all day, get a bunch of currency for the new items, and then use the new items to make progress towards the designated deck you want. So instead of just farming an entire deck in one run, when you do Sortie runs, you're making progress, getting more deck changing items for that specific deck you want, and getting one step closer to the final product. So even though there still is a decent amount of RNG involved, you can make consistent progress over multiple Sortie runs rather than having to farm an entire deck in one chaos run, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's the infographic. I'm gonna leave it up for a few more seconds if you want to screenshot this and use it. Now, getting into possibly the most important thing for deck farming. I was getting a ton of comments on my Heidemarie guide video that a lot of people didn't know how to farm decks. And one of the main problems I saw is that they did not have these zero system upgrades. These are very, very, very important. I cannot stress this enough. So if we head over here to the upgrade tab, you have a bunch of upgrades. You get these gear cogs for zero system upgrades. And these zero system upgrades are going to help you so much when farming decks. So this first section, not really too important. This cognitive flash upgrade is pretty nice because increased Epiphany chance by 3%. The next one, the shop upgrade, is also pretty nice, decreasing the equipment cost by 20%. Gonna save you some credits. And then these last two, this one just increased credits gained, and this last one right here, mental breakdown recovery chance increased by 40%, which may save you in some cases. But the actual very important upgrades come from the second and third category. I'm not gonna go through all of these because there's just so many, and I kind of want to make this a quick guide for you guys, so I'm just gonna talk about kind of like the main ones. So this first one here, I'm pretty sure this is the Kyrken's Blessing, where you get to select a random one of 3 options when you go into Seasonal Chaos. I usually always choose the left option that makes 3 battles 1 HP just for time consistency. It saves you a ton of time. And yeah, onto this next one, rare unidentified area appearances rate increased by 20%. Rare events are gonna be better, so this one's pretty solid to pick up too. For this next one, restock, you get 2 free refreshes in the shop. This is really, really good. Saves you some credits, and allows you to have more chances for the designated gears you want. This next one, this training, this can be good if you're going for a neutral deck, or you want a deck with neutrals in it, such as Gear Bag, Negotiate. This training can help increase the odds of getting those cards. And then onto the last upgrade for the second section. This one's really good, one of the most important ones. It's Meditation. So this is going to allow you to re-epiphany a card if it got a bad epiphany. So say you got the 3-cost epiphany on Heidemarie Sword Rain that has exhaust, right? But you don't want that for that specific deck. You can just meditate. It will cost credits, so keep that in mind. It'll cost 80 at first. It scales the same way as removing cards from the shop, so 80, 120, 2160, but it will give you a new set of 3 new Epiphanies. This is one of the major changes they made in season 2 when updating the deck farming. It is really nice because when before, if you got a bad Epiphany in like season 1, you were just kind of like screwed over. So yeah, highly recommend to get Meditate. And then moving on to this third section for the upgrades, very important upgrade here called Ascendant Revelation. Increase Divine Epiphany chance by 15%. So this is going to make you get a lot more Divine Epiphanies, and I highly recommend to get this if you can. And onto the next upgrade, and arguably the most important upgrade in all of these upgrades, called Identification Signal Duplication. So this is going to allow you to select which combatant you want to copy. The amount of RNG that goes down when you get this is so much. Like, this is so much value, and I highly recommend every new player to pick this up because this is the reason why you're struggling making decks if you're a newer player. The selected combatant copy. So up on the screen right now, I'm going to show pictures, and it's basically going to be like if you were to select Epiphany through an event for a specific unit during that run, but just for the dupe copies. So you get to choose which unit you want, and it'll get one of 3 cards to select to dupe of that unit. Now keep in mind, you can still whiff with this upgrade, but it's a lot less chance now. Most decks, you're probably going to be removing 2 Epiphany cards anyways. I highly recommend to remove Epiphany cards first before the basics when farming decks, just so they can't steal a slot in the copy event. So yeah, very highly recommend everyone to pick this up. And yeah, those are the upgrades and basically the ones you need to get. It makes such a big difference deck farming with all of these. And then onto the next segment of this video, and something important that I want to state: when you are farming decks, you have to evaluate 2 lowest value Epiphany cards for each unit. So like for example, Heidemarie, her worst value cards are Hero to All and Thread of Light. Now I'm not saying they're bad, but they're her worst value cards compared to Sword Rain or Effulgent Expansion. And this entire game revolves around cycling your entire 3 decks every turn, and having thin decks being able to cycle to get the most value every turn. You don't want to have bloated decks that have upwards of like maybe 9 cards unless you have Epiphanies that can go neutral and cycle themselves. But most people usually farm around 6 card decks, which is like pretty thin and easy to cycle in most composition. And then next we have the difficulties and tiers for the seasonal chaos. So like I was saying earlier about the tiers, that depends on how many points you get per run. The higher the tier, the more points you can get, with a max base of tier 15 on your worlds going up to 16 with Nightmare. So up on the screen, I'm going to have each tier and how many points you get for that tier. I highly recommend farming on difficulty 8 for seasonal chaos, just because this is the lowest difficulty you can go for a tier 15. You can't get a tier 15 on difficulty 7. And why tier 15s are so important is because once you put Nightmare mode and get tier 16, you can get quad divine decks with 3 removes of basics. And quad divine decks are basically the best decks in the game. If you want to keep a basic, then maybe you could farm one on like tier 14. But if you really want to minimax, we highly advise to do tier 16, remove all 3 basics, get 4 divines. And yeah, as for the modifiers on the worlds, some of them can be really challenging, especially if you're a new player. Like if you're using 9 and you get the neglect modifier on a world and it discards your hue, it basically makes 9 unplayable on that world. It's like really bad, and you have to cycle your entire deck again just to get hue, which can get discarded again. So highly recommend to not choose neglect when using 9 on your world. Some other modifiers that you may find difficulty with, especially if you're a new player, are decrease max HP. Usually for endgame players, you're not going to be struggling with this because we have built and fleshed out units, so this isn't a problem when you're later on, but early game it can be annoying. The same thing goes for Fortitude, aka Harden. Fortitude is a really annoying buff on enemies because it decreases the damage you do to them, or they take. So if they get a lot of Fortitude stacks, you're not really going to be doing damage and they're going to become way harder to kill. The decreased credits modifier is fine just because we get so much select and remove copy events, and most of the events give a bunch of credits, so that's not really too bad. I'm pretty sure that's just on battles too. It doesn't increase the credits you get from events. And then the add elite zones modifier, this can take up question mark zones, just keep that in mind. So usually you want to go for as many question mark zones, especially in floor 2, because there's a floor 2 copy event that you don't want to miss. So adding elite zones to the modifier can take up question mark zones. And if you're a newer player, you can click the top left of your unit's faces and icons to see how much save data you have that run. Or like if you're in the middle of a run, you can click the top left. It'll tell you how many points you have per character. As for the Kyrken's Blessing, like I talked about earlier, I vaguely talked about it. I usually just go the left option always for the 3 normal battles for 1 HP. You can go something like increase credits for the middle one, or the right one will have select and remove options also, whether it be 1 or 2. That's totally fine to take also, but I just like to be time efficient because the 3 battles at 1 HP saves me a lot of time. Something important also when you're farming divine decks is that every unit has a base of 1 to 2 starting Epiphanies per chaos run, as long as you have their first potential unlocked. So if you're going for a divine deck, such as like Repose for Veronica, Repose is not her starting card, so you're gonna have to get lucky and win the 50-50 in the beginning of the chaos run and get Repose instead of Pendant of Resolution. But something also that's worth mentioning, not having this potential unlocked will make farming 0 card decks very much easier, and 0 card decks are very strong when starting off in the game. So basically what a 0 card deck is and what it does is just 0 cards. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory, but there are 2 meanings. It can be a straight 0 card deck, or it could be like a deck with 2 upgrades, and since upgrades go away and are passive after you use them, them, it's therefore a 0-card deck. So either work and are fine for cycling your entire 3 decks. It just makes cycling a lot easier. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we get into the Sortie game mode is the floor 2 copy event. A lot of people are having trouble and asking a bunch of questions on where you get all the copies for these decks. So boss 1 will give you 1 copy. There is a floor 2 event that allows you to copy, and then you get the 3rd copy from boss 2. So like I was talking about the elite modifier on your worlds earlier, in the modifier and tier section, that modifier can take up question mark zones, and you potentially could whiff this copy event in floor 2. You usually need around 6 question mark zones to guarantee the copy event. That is something to keep in mind when scouting ahead in floor 2. Most floor 2 copy events have a rare version of them which gives mythic equipment, but I usually highly advise to never take the equipment, just always take the copy, because the extra card copy is going to do a lot more for you than the mythic equipment. Unless you are running like a super thin deck that doesn't require like, you know, more copies, such as like a 3-card or Leia deck, then maybe depending on what equipment it is, it could be worth it. But yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. And I think that's kind of like everything you need to know for seasonal chaos. You won't be farming seasonal chaos as much now that Sortie is out, but you still need to farm seasonal chaos for good gear on the deck and just like the base layout and template of the deck. Still, ideally, you want to try to get the best deck you can in seasonal chaos so you can save yourself some deck changing items and don't have to do Sortie as much. But yeah, I'll let Gordon talk about Sortie and, you know, everything you need to know about Sortie.
So Sortie is basically the roguelite mode. You can think of it like Slay the Spire, where you're going to have ascension levels, and the higher ascension that you're playing, the more currency you get. But for newer players, you're gonna want to play at the lowest ascension because it's actually quite difficult. Sortie is going to be where you're going to be buying currency to craft decks with. So this is like very, very similar to Path of Exile. In fact, the cores look like orbs from Path of Exile. I'm sure it's very, very heavily inspired. So right now, I'm, as you can see on the screen, I am crafting Cassius Morale deck for this season. I have a base deck that I'm crafting on. So what you're looking for when you're crafting a deck is good gear and good engravings. I'm not going for engravings that much, but as you can see, I have the mythical weapon for Tentacles of Chaos from Senectus. That's very, very best for support like Cassius. And now I have the Devil Dices that I'm slowly rolling. So I'm using common cores to roll into 2 morale, and then I'm using the divine cores to hopefully roll into cost reduction. So you do this with every character, right? You go into Chaos, you're looking for gear. Gear is the most important thing now. It doesn't matter how bad your deck turns out. Just make sure you copy the cards. Don't even care about what the Epiphanies are. You can just flash them later. I would emphasize more priority on gear because you cannot craft those in your deck. Whatever gear and engravings that are saved onto this save data, you cannot change with cores. So obviously you do want to get the Epiphanies that you want to build around, but majority of the time you are focusing on gear. Now, of course, if you don't want to min-max, you don't have to care about gear and you can just, you know, craft a deck normally. But I really wouldn't consider using cores on a deck with that gear. Like as you can see right now, I only have 2 Devil Dices that are on morale and cost reduction. I'm gonna be slowly rolling the other Devil Dices. So let's talk a little bit about Sortie. So in Sortie, it's all about how consistent the character is, whether or not the potential is good by itself, or if it's a 2-card combo. You do not want Epiphanies that require lots of synergy. Typically in save data, you can facilitate having the exact Epiphanies you want. However, in Sortie, you just have to play with what you're given. An Epiphany can be B tier in save data, but S tier in Sortie. Like for example, Heidemarie's Thread of Light has only 1 S tier Epiphany in save data, but the 1st, 2nd, and 5th Epiphany for Thread of Light are all S tier in Sortie. It is very worth picking up, but not too many of them. You don't want to bloat your deck still. This goes for a lot of characters too. A lot of characters have Epiphanies that are not terrific in save data. Same thing with Vanguards. Vanguards are not great in save data. However, in Sortie, they are S tier. You always want to pick up at least 1 5-star Vanguard when you're running Sortie. Typically, we are thinking about Magna and Khalipe. The 4-star Vanguards are not terrific because their base kits are very bad and they need a lot of potentials to start running their synergy. For example, Maribel. Maribel has a okay base kit, but a lot of her Epiphanies depend on how much current shield you have. You cannot rely on having a big shield every turn. So for Maribel, she's much lower priority than let's say Magna, who can just apply counterattacks and counter for free whenever. And whenever you have the AP to just shield on her, you can do it whenever. It doesn't require a high level of synergy to facilitate her design. When you're doing Sortie, I do think that you should always take the penalty at the beginning when you first start your run. It's either choose between 3 fates or take the penalty and then get 2 rare fates and then a rare reward. The first 2 floors aren't really that big of a deal. However, the 3rd floor boss will filter a lot of decks. So having that extra power for that final boss actually matters a lot than having an easier start. So there's going to to be 8 risk modifiers that you can unlock for level 80 sortie. We're going to put on an infographic of my priority of the risk modifiers. If there is a modifier that you don't like more than me, you can take that over the number 8. But for me personally, decreased draw by 1 is probably the worst one. You can play around most of the other modifiers, but the decreased draw by 1 is actually really, really bad. That risk modifier is basically saying you draw 1 curse card every turn. That does nothing, right? That's essentially what it does. The next worst one, you can take this over the draw 1. It's when fate and cards are gained, unable to select one random selection. So whenever you get selection for either your fates or a card after a fight or a boss battle, you only get 2 out of the 3, and they show you what you miss out on, and I think that's like really scummy of them, but it's kind of funny. The rest areas, increase of cost of items and decreased recovery amount. You're not really resting on bonfires that often. You're going to be relying on your shielder and sustainer to be keeping you healthy and keeping you stress free. However, the increase of cost items, these shop items are so expensive with this. It is a very hard modifier. In fact, the gear is so expensive that most of your gear, if you take this, will be coming from events. So you do want to prioritize an equal balance of events and fights. You want fights early because you have less combatants to bloat your choices of cards, so you get to get your damage dealers cards early. And the first 5, I'm not even like gonna go over them. Even though these modifiers aren't like that bad, they will be adding onto the risk modifier, which means enemies will have more HP, deal more damage, you receive more stress from them. I would recommend taking these if you can already clear level 80 easily. So there isn't much choices for damage dealers this season, mostly because they need to be able to beat every single boss. So characters who rely too often on multi-hits will get punished by the boss from Swamp of Judgment. Characters who do too many actions will be punished by the boss from Blue Pot, and characters without enough multi-hits will be punished by the boss from City of the Mist. You do need a character that is able to do everything, and there is one character who can do everything. They can do multi-hit, they can do big single target, they have low action count. That is Heidemarie. She is so good for sortie that I don't see how anyone would be able to clear high level sortie without her. If you don't have Heidemarie yet, highly suggest picking her up just so she can carry your sortie. Heidemarie is so good because a lot of her cards are either good by themselves or just insane with a 2-card combo, right? We have Sword Rain, which is good just by itself. We have Thread of Light, which is good with enough links in hand. This scales like crazy in sortie because you have issues with making consistent decks. These are very easy thresholds to hit, like having 3 or more link cards in hand, super easy to get. And then Effulgent expansions, especially the upgrade that adds consistency, you will always be doing damage every turn with the upgrade. A lot of the elites and bosses do need to be killed very quickly, so having consistent DPS while you have passive sustain from your shielders and healers is very important. Every single damaging card in her kit can just be used instantly. It doesn't need anything else to really do that much damage. A lot of characters, they rely on like 1 damage card and then they have a bunch of other supporting cards around it, right? They're not terrific in sortie because of that. And also another reason why Heide is so good is that she can buff herself. Getting buffs in chaos content is extremely hard. Her Effulgent expansion, just buffing for free is crazy, especially if you have Sylvia, where if you link this onto a cheap card, the quietest cards just play for free. Let's go over to Magna. Magna is very good for sortie. So Magna had issues in save data because doing passive damage for free, kind of just like sitting there and like sometimes shielding, sometimes applying vulnerable, sometimes counterattacking, it's not great. There are other characters that can do things that are more explosive than her. Same thing with Heidemarie, right? You need characters that are just good from the get-go. Someone whose entire kit can be used without Epiphanies. Also, all the Epiphanies are decent enough, right? So Ice Fragment just gains a counterattack, gives you shield at the end of the turn. A very good card, has lead. So if you find multifaceted, this will play for free. Now, I do want to bring up one of the Ice Fragment upgrades that you do not want to take. There is one that says at the end of turn, 200% defense-based damage to all enemies. You do not want to take this. There are elites and there are bosses that will punish you if you do damage to them after a specific thing, right? There is an elite that if it's damaged after it's taken turns, it will counterattack you with a strong attack. If it counterattacks twice, it will just kill you after because it will get enraged. This end of turn defense-based damage counts as activation for that elite. There are other elites and bosses that I'm missing out on that I've lost my run to because I picked this up. So just be aware, you don't really want to take this. The other ice fragments are more than enough. Glacial Iron Fist, all of the Epiphanies are great. It's just damage. It gives you a big shield. You obviously don't want too many of them them because you don't want to bloat your deck. You want to see more of your main damage dealer's cards, but in a pinch, these are very, very nice, and it can save you a lot of stress. And then on Ice Wall, the best one on Ice Wall is the upgrade. You know, if you have multifaceted, it plays for free. So AoE in Sortie is very important. So turning your counterattacks to AoE for a couple turns actually helps clear mobs very, very well. Some bosses even have ads that you do need to kill early. It's a very good card out the gate. You don't really need Epiphanies on it, but it doesn't hurt to have it. And then Frost Charge is a very good source of vulnerable. And then Khalipe, very good unit as well, same as Magna. More consistent AoE damage, more shielding, but less access to vulnerable and less damage overall because she does need to see her cards to do damage. She does not gain counterattacks passively. She does do a lot of shielding and she can passively shield. There is a Vulture Eject, which is retain. If you get like 2 of these Vulture Ejects and just sit on them, don't even activate your Celestial, you can have this in your hand forever and just passively shield the entire fight. It's a very, very strong Epiphany. You should consider taking this and find ways to not proc it. And then the rest of her cards, they shield quite a large amount, and she is Celestial, so she will doing most of her kit for free. Also, another good thing about Khalipe is that she is very good at proccing the 1-hit invulnerability Sortie modifier, so that's a little extra benefit of running Khalipe, so your Heidemarie's swords don't get eaten and do like 1 damage. And then for the best sustainer in Sortie, I've tried most sustainers. My favorite sustainer so far is Tiphera. A lot of her cards are free, gives you AP, usually draw neutral, she does buff, she does shield, she does literally everything. She can even do a little bit of damage. If you get the Creation of Destruction upgrade, you will be doing quite a lot of chip damage, shielding, and healing. She heals for so much in this content. I think heals and shields are buffed in Sortie. Like, I don't know why I'm sustaining for so much. I do think sustain is increased in Sortie. I don't know where it says that, but I can definitely feel it because like sometimes I'm ending turn with like 1,700 shield from like Magna, Khalipe, Tiphera, and like I played like 2 cards, right? It's like it's really weird. But Tiphera is very, very good, much better than Mika because Mika doesn't have the capabilities of going draw neutral. But if you don't find Tiphera, Mika is fine. But my second favorite sustain from Sortie is Orleia. She can just retain and heal for free. Not as good as Tiphera because she lacks the consistency. Can't really find ways to guarantee the specific creation you want. Like you can just create a bunch of Swifties over and over again and you just hate yourself. But if you get a ton of sturdies or softies, you are in great shape. If you find the option of either picking up Tiphera or Orleia, I would definitely pick up Tiphera over Orleia. But Orleia is the second best sustainer outside of Tiphera. So in the upgrades, you do want to go into a little bit of flexible. There are some very, very important upgrades you need to pick up. Unlocking the ability to flash your cards is very important because you're going to have issues getting Epiphanies on your cards. You don't actually proc Epiphanies in battle like you do in Chaos. All of the Epiphany cards that you get are either through events or you're going to be picking up cards with already Epiphanies onto them. So unlocking the ability to flash your cards is very, very important. You're going to be flashing instead of resting on almost every campsite. You also do want to pick up these 2 where you are able to re-roll the combatants that join your party and re-roll the fates that you get. You don't really need to go too far into flexible tactics because the monsters in Sortie do have a lot of HP, defense, and damage. So you do want to focus mostly on tactical authority to make your runs smoother. In tactical authority, it's literally just damage, health, and defense. But very, very important tactical authority, you always want to pick up the crit chance. Getting crit in Sortie is very important because you don't have memory fragments in Sortie, right? So you can't get a high crit rate. This is the only way you're getting crit rate. So in the Sortie shop, there are a couple that are limited for I think 28 days. The Core of Reverse that duplicates 1 selected card. There's also a Core of Annihilation that allows you to remove 1 selected card. So the removal and the dupe are important to find for your save data before you start crafting on them. Obviously, if you don't find the dupe event and you're crafting a really good deck, I would highly consider using your Core of Reverse for that save data, but you do want to use these sparingly. The Core of Potential that allows you to select a unique Epiphany, those are unlimited, although very expensive. You won't need too many of them, so I wouldn't really bother with buying too many of these. However, you will be buying a lot of these. These are called Abyssal Cores, currencies that apply Divine Epiphany to 1 select card. These are random, so you're going to be gambling on what Divine Epiphany you're getting over and over and over again, and you're going to be buying a lot of these, especially for characters that need Divine Epiphanies on their attack cards like Cassius. Attack cards have around 9 Divine Epiphanies, so it's a 1 out of 9 chance. If you're landing a 1 out of 9 4 times, you need on average 36 tries. So you're going to be spending on average 36k black mass per divine deck, especially for your people who are trying to build their morale Cassius. So 36k, it depends on how high of a level you're playing at. Like I get around 10,000 black currency if I spend all my stamina. I'm playing 27 out of 30 in level 80 sortie. So I need around 4 runs to get my divine Cassius deck. Obviously there are outliers. You can get it sooner, you can get it later, you can maybe even never get it, but on average it will be 36k black mass for specifically an attack divine deck. For skill divine decks, their divine choices are much smaller. Some skills have like 1 to 3, some other skills 1 to 4, but it will never be as sporadic as a 1 to 9 for attack card. So the currency that you need for building a skill divine deck, like let's say you're planning on building an AP or draw repose Veronica, it should be a little under half of the black mass that you need for morale devil dice Cassius. This is a very important currency. You will be buying this very often. The next core is called the colorless core. It applies a common epiphany to one selected card. This is also random, but it's not that bad. There's only like 4 neutral epiphanies that you can get per card. The only characters that I can realistically see using this, either Yuki because she needs 3 morale flash slash to facilitate her build, or obviously for the 2 morale devil dice divine Cassius deck. You're really not going to be buying this too often, but it's still a pretty good core. This last core is called the core of archetype. It adds an unacquired or removed unique card. So this core does not unremove the remove cap of your card that you removed. So say you removed something in chaos and then you reintroduced it with your core of archetype. It does not reduce the amount of removes you can get for that run. So you can only have 5 removes. Let's say you removed one of your unique cards and it's 5 out of 5. If you core of archetype, that does not go to 4 out of 5. You are still 5 out of 5 removes. So you cannot core of annihilation it back. So be very careful when using this core of archetype. There are use cases for this core of archetype. Let's say you go the entire run without finding one of your unique cards. This can bring it back. There's also another very interesting use case for this. Characters like Rin who have no unique cards. So what you can do is that you can remove her annihilation and black dance, just carry her throughout the entire run, and you can core of archetype them back. But outside of the interesting use case with characters like Rin who don't have many unique cards, there really isn't much of a use for this. You're not often going to be buying this. You're mostly going to be buying your abyssal cores. There's another thing you could do with sortie is that this is actually the best place to farm stuff like EXP or potentials. If you're playing on one of the highest levels of sortie, you're going to be getting so much black mass that on average you will outpace the currency that you get from simulation. So if you do truly want to min-max this game, this is where you will be spending most of your daily energy as well, but you don't need to, right? It obviously takes much longer than just doing simulation, so you don't have to do it. Just a side note.
But yeah, that's going to be the video. I hope this video was informative. You know, a lot of you guys were asking for a deck or sortie guide. I know there's a lot of new players coming to CZN right now, especially with the half anniversary and, you know, the hype of Heidemarie being unlimited. So I hope this video helped dimmed it down and you can understand deck farming a lot easier now, whether it be seasonal chaos or sortie. We actually just hit 4K subscribers, so I appreciate and thank all of you guys who support and show love to my guides and, you know, all my videos. It means a ton to me. Next milestone, 5K subscribers. I definitely did not think we were going to be this close this fast, but yeah, I plan on covering CZN a very long time and you guys can count on me to keep making videos. And that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys take care, peace, and be safe until the next one.